Claire, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago. My father said, voice cold and distant, like I was a stranger sitting across from him, not his only daughter. That was the moment everything cracked. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a week after my college graduation. I'd driven 3 hours to Charleston for what I thought was a celebratory lunch with my dad. I wore my best navy dress, heels that pinched, and a heart wide open, naively expecting love. Instead, I got a truth bomb that would incinerate everything I thought I knew. You're not my biological daughter, Claire, and you're not in the will. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stared at the man who had raised me, taught me to ride a bike, scolded me for sneaking out, and tucked me in with bedtime stories. What? My voice came out cracked, barely human. He didn't flinch. Your mother lied to me. I got the DNA test results 2 months ago. I kept it quiet, tried to process it. But I've made my decision. He slid a sealed envelope across the table like he was handing off a restaurant receipt, not a death sentence. Inside was a notarized copy of his will. My name wasn't on it, but my half-brother Mark's name was. Over and over. Mark, the golden boy who called me the accident, whenever our parents weren't looking. Everything went silent. Even the air in the restaurant felt still, like the whole world had paused to watch me break. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw through his carefully crafted lies. But all I did was nod, because I had a plan. And my father? He had no clue what was coming. I wasn't just disowned. I was erased. The next few days felt like a funeral, where I was the only one mourning. My mother, dead for 6 years, couldn't defend herself. And Mark, he reveled in it. Sent me a text that just said, "Guess we always knew you didn't belong." Now it's official. The betrayal wasn't a cut. It was a decapitation. But let me back up. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 27. I just earned my MBA, graduated top of my class, and for most of my life, I thought I was the daughter of Alan Whitmore, a respected Charleston real estate mogul. The man the community adored. The man who called me his princess before making me homeless with 10 words. You're not mine. You're not in the will. Let that sink in.
He didn't ask me how I felt.
He didn't cry. He just decided I didn't qualify anymore. And the worst part? Everyone I confronted about it said the same thing. Let it go. It's just money.
No.
It wasn't about the money. It was about the lie. It was about 27 years of hugs, scraped knees, birthdays, lullabies, school recitals, and the idea that all of that could be shredded by a lab report. I cried the first night, curled up in my apartment. No family, no closure, just betrayal like poison in my bloodstream. But by the second night, I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. 2 weeks later, I sent my father a gift, an antique leather-bound book. Inside it, a single photo of me as a toddler, sitting on his lap, both of us laughing. He had a paper crown on his head and chocolate frosting on his nose. The caption I wrote beneath it? DNA doesn't raise a child. A father does. You stopped being one the day you chose a test over me. I mailed it anonymously. No return address. I knew he'd open it. He always loved antique books. I heard through a family friend that he locked himself in his study for hours after seeing it.
Good.
That was only the beginning. But don't get me wrong. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. I started digging into my father's businesses. His charity foundation. His shell companies. The whispers of embezzlement I'd overheard growing up. And what I found? Let's just say the DNA test may have freed him from being my father. But it also freed me from protecting his secrets. Meanwhile, Mark was busy parading around town like he'd won the inheritance lottery. He moved into my childhood home, ripped down my old posters, turned my bedroom into a trophy room for his college football awards, posted photos with captions like, "Legacy secured." And every post was like a knife in my chest. But he made a mistake. He underestimated me. He thought I was broken.
What he didn't know.
I was rebuilding.
Piece by piece.
Stronger, sharper, more dangerous than ever. I started recording. Every interaction, every conversation, I pretended to patch things up with my father, pretended to forgive, bought coffee, smiled sweetly, played the dutiful daughter, all while collecting information that would burn his empire to the ground. And on the night of the Whitmore Foundation Gala, $50,000, a table fundraiser for underprivileged youth, I made my first move. I walked in wearing my mother's emerald necklace, the one Dad said was lost in a robbery 10 years ago. Everyone noticed. Everyone whispered. And when I walked past my father, his face turned white, because he knew. He knew I knew the truth about that necklace, about that robbery, and about the lie that made him rich. He pulled me aside, tried to smile through clenched teeth. "Where did you get that necklace?" I smiled. "From Mom, the real one," and walked away. But what he didn't see was that the gala live stream, being viewed by thousands, zoomed in on the necklace too. And within minutes, everything began to unravel. The air inside the Whitmore Foundation Gala was thick with champagne, fake smiles, and old Charleston money. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, but every step I took felt like I was walking toward a controlled explosion. And I was holding the detonator. I could feel eyes on me from every corner, some admiring, some confused, and a few downright venomous, especially my father's. He stood near the main stage, surrounded by city officials and donors, laughing too loud, performing his favorite role, Alan Whitmore, the generous, philanthropic family man. But I knew the truth. I was the truth. And that emerald necklace on my collarbone? The one he claimed had been stolen a decade ago. It was the match that would light the fuse. Let's rewind. 3 days before the gala, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Claire," the voice said. "It's Aunt Becca, your mom's sister." I froze. Aunt Becca had cut ties with the family after my mom's funeral. Everyone said she was crazy, unstable, jealous of my father's success. She wasn't. She was just the only one who knew. "I heard what he did," she said quietly. "Cutting you out of the will like that. Claire, I have something your mother left behind. Something you need to see." She handed me a box when we met in a dusty storage unit outside Somerville. Inside were photographs, handwritten notes, an old USB stick, and the necklace, gleaming with secrets. But it wasn't just jewelry. It was evidence. Evidence that the Whitmore fortune had been built on fraud. My mother's journals detailed how Dad embezzled donation funds from his own charity, used offshore accounts, bought fake property deeds. And when she threatened to go public, the robbery happened. The necklace vanished. And my mother's car accident no longer felt like an accident. So here I was, back at the gala, necklace on full display, smile painted on like war paint, ready to turn his perfect night into a public nightmare. "You're playing with fire," Mark whispered as I passed him. "You always were."
I leaned in. "No, Mark."
"I am the fire." At 9:42 p.m., my cue came. The host called up Alan Whitmore for his legacy speech, a 20-minute monologue he recycled every year to remind everyone how generous and humble he was. I slipped out to the media booth upstairs. The gala was being live-streamed to over 100,000 viewers on the Whitmore Foundation website and local networks. And just as my father said the words, "Integrity is the foundation of everything I've built," I inserted the USB drive.
Click. Drag. Drop.
The screen behind him flickered. Then everything changed. Photos appeared. Of offshore accounts. Forged signatures. Property scams. Journal entries. Bank statements. Even emails to a known money launderer in the Cayman Islands. And finally, a photo of the necklace, time-stamped 4 days after the robbery. The room erupted.
Gasps. Shouts.
Phones flying into the air. Whispers turning into screams. One woman actually fainted. My father stood frozen. The mic in his hand squealed with feedback as his smile collapsed. "Turn it off," he barked at the tech crew. "That's fake. It's all fake." But it was too late. The live stream chat exploded. "Is this real? He stole from his own foundation? Who is that girl wearing the necklace? Is that his daughter? Whistleblower queen. Claire Whitmore, we see you." I watched him from the booth. The man who disowned me, now being disowned by the very public he built his empire on. And you know what? I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And truth, once unleashed, is louder than any lie. He tried to chase me down after the lights went black and the event descended into chaos. I slipped out through the back entrance, but I saw his face as I passed, the panic, the betrayal, the raw fear. For the first time in my life, he looked smaller than me. I went back to my apartment, locked the door, and watched the headlines flood in. Breaking: Charleston mogul Alan Whitmore accused of fraud, embezzlement, and cover-up by daughter. Whitmore dynasty shattered. You're not mine, daughter strikes back with receipts. Mark tried to call me 17 times that night. I didn't pick up. Instead, I opened an email from the IRS. I had filed a full report with everything Aunt Becca gave me. The house of cards had begun to fall. But even as the world crumbled around my father, I couldn't stop shaking. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He still had influence. Still had secrets I hadn't unearthed. And part of me feared what he'd do next. Because a man like Alan Whitmore doesn't go down quietly. He burns everything around him first. You're being sued for defamation, digital intrusion, and slander. Congratulations, Claire. You made the front page, and now you're going to pay for it. That's what Mark said when he showed up outside my apartment the morning after the gala. He wasn't angry. He was smirking, holding the lawsuit papers like they were party invitations.
His suit was crisp.
His hair gelled to perfection. But behind that polished grin was desperation dressed in arrogance. I didn't flinch, because I'd been expecting this. My father, humiliated, exposed, and backed into a legal corner, was using the only weapon he had left: the law. A courtroom. A smear campaign. He wanted to ruin me publicly the same way I'd ruined him. But he made one mistake. He underestimated the daughter he disowned. The courtroom wasn't a place I ever thought I'd belong. But as I sat there, facing down the man who raised me, loved me, then cast me aside like I was defective merchandise, I realized something. He hadn't just underestimated me. He didn't know me at all. Not anymore. Their legal team was ruthless. 4 attorneys. 3 consultants. Dozens of exhibits painting me as a vengeful daughter with abandonment issues. They brought up my therapy sessions, my journal entries, the night I failed a midterm after Mom's funeral. They made me out to be unstable, manipulative, delusional. And my father? He played the grieving man, the betrayed philanthropist. He said, I still love Claire, but she's troubled. And I had no choice. It was Oscar-worthy. But I wasn't acting. I was armed. Because while they were busy attacking my character, I was busy building my case. And it wasn't just Aunt Becca's documents anymore. Since the gala, anonymous whistleblowers from inside the Whitmore Foundation had come forward. Former assistants, bookkeepers. One man, James Keene, the charity's former CFO, handed over a hard drive with years of doctored financials. And that robbery that supposedly destroyed my mother's belongings? Police reports were missing. But I found the insurance claim, filed under a false name, reimbursed for twice the necklace's value. Then came the nail in the coffin. A voicemail from my mother, saved on Aunt Becca's old phone. It was from a week before her death. Alan's going to destroy everything if I talk. He said he'll tell Claire she's not his. But I won't let him rewrite her life with a test. She's his daughter in every way that matters. The courtroom went silent when I played it. I watched my father's face drain of color. Watched the jury shift in their seats. Watched the press start typing faster. By the end of week 2, the case had flipped. His legal team requested a settlement behind closed doors. They wanted it buried.
Quiet. Gone.
They offered me $5 million to disappear. A formal statement saying we'd resolved a family misunderstanding. But I didn't want money. I wanted the world to see who he really was. So I declined. And instead, I countersued. For emotional abuse, fraud, breach of trust, and defamation. The headlines doubled. The judge set a new trial date for the counterclaim. And in that moment, the public narrative shifted. No longer ungrateful daughter attacks father. Now it was disowned daughter turns courtroom into justice crusade. Claire Whitmore is the storm her father created. The DNA test wasn't the betrayal. Cutting her out was. That night, I got a voicemail from Mark. He sounded shaken. Claire, you need to stop. Dad's unraveling. If this keeps going, it's not just him, it's the whole family. We'll all go down. I didn't respond. Because we weren't a family anymore. They buried me the day they erased me from that will. What they didn't realize. I wasn't buried. I was planted.
And now?
I was rising. After court that day, I sat in my car outside the Charleston courthouse and watched the sunset melt into the harbor. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. Because I didn't need his name anymore. I was building one of my own. You'll never survive without this name, my father once told me. That name, Whitmore, used to open doors.
But now?
It opened investigations, IRS audits, federal fraud charges, class action suits from donors demanding refunds. The legacy he tried to protect by disowning me was now radioactive. Because he'd forgotten the one rule about building an empire on lies. It only takes one truth to bring it all down. And I was that truth. Let's talk about what happened after the courtroom. The lawsuit went viral. Millions watched the clips. TikTok turned my story into a trend. Reddit dug up everything. The necklace, the robbery, the offshore accounts. Even Mark's posts mocking me were dissected. The world picked sides, and most picked mine. People started messaging me. I believed you from the start. Your story gave me the courage to cut off my toxic family. You're the definition of resilience. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a mirror, reflecting the pain so many daughters like me had swallowed in silence. And then something I never expected happened. A woman approached me outside a coffee shop. Elegant, older, fierce eyes. She introduced herself as Margaret Collins, founder of a Charleston nonprofit focused on women displaced by inheritance fraud and family betrayal. We've been watching you, she said. You're not just a story, Claire. You're a symbol. And we want you on our board. I blinked.
Wait.
You want me? She smiled. You destroyed a corrupt empire. Now, let's help you build a better one. And I did. We launched Daughters Reclaimed, a legal and financial support network for women shut out by toxic patriarchal families. The first week, 20,000 signups. The second, media coverage from CNN, MSNBC, even a documentary deal. The irony? My father cut me out of the will to preserve his empire, and I built a bigger one out of its ruins. But let's not pretend it was easy. The day they arrested Alan Whitmore for tax fraud and embezzlement, I felt a strange ache in my chest. This man raised me. He taught me how to read. He carried me on his shoulders. And then he threw me into fire and blamed me for burning. I visited him once after his arraignment. Not out of pity. For closure. He sat behind the glass, hollow-eyed, in a beige prison jumpsuit that stripped him of the nameplate, the power, the illusion. Why did you do it? He whispered. And I looked him dead in the eye. Because I am your daughter. Just not the kind who stays silent when you bury the truth. Mark vanished from Charleston after the trial. Last I heard, he was bartending in Miami, trying to escape the family name he once worshipped. Aunt Becca now lives 2 blocks away from me. We do Sunday dinners. She saved pieces of my mother I never knew existed, letters, recipes, old Polaroids. Through her, I rebuilt my mother's memory, one story at a time.
And as for me,
I legally changed my last name, not because I was ashamed, but because I earned the right to choose who I became. I chose Claire Monroe, a name untainted, a name that stood because it wasn't borrowed from a man who lied to me. This morning, I gave a speech to 800 young women at a college campus in North Carolina. I told them the truth. Family doesn't begin and end with DNA. It begins with how you're treated when no one's watching. And sometimes being cut off isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a better one. So here's the truth. I lost everything I thought defined me, and I built something better from the wreckage. I was never just a daughter. I was the reckoning. And I hope, if you're watching this and your story feels like mine, you realize you don't have to stay buried in someone else's shame. You can rise,
Reclaim.
rebuild, and burn the lie down to light your way.